Hello, everybody! I'm so excited to bring you round 7 of this FIDE World Championship final between Anand and Carlsen. I mean, if you don't know who's playing, then I don't know whose videos you've been watching because we said it every single time. And really, I mean, come on, get your act together. So I'm Fusion, as again you should know, and Calm is also joining me because that's what we do in LMB. We have this sort of dynamic duo thing going on, right?
It's very dynamic.
Yeah. Well, mine's more dynamic. Yours is kind of positional, but anyway, round 7, second half of this championship. Anand gets the white pieces again. That's 2 in a row. I mean, if he can't do anything with 2 whites, then he doesn't deserve to be world champion. Controversial opinion, perhaps.
But he did lose his last game as well.
Yeah, last 2 games he's just thrown it away. So he better get his act together. Harsh, perhaps, but let's see how he goes. Into the game, e4. I mean, that's a good start. I mean, you know, props to him for playing this proper move.
So I was wondering
pretty
if
much all of us lose.
Yeah, I was wondering if he's going to play some really aggressive opening, just based on the last 2 games, thinking that he needs to come back.
Well, he should do.
But we'll see.
e45, knight f3, knight c6. So plenty of good options here. He can play bishop c4 and get into some Italian game. He can play d4 as a Scotch. And that's pretty much it, really, in this kind of stuff. Knight c3, again, it gets super boring. And yeah, bishop b5. Well, we've seen how he's done with that move, so let's see what he does. Oh dear.
So he plays the Royal Opens again, which isn't bad by itself, but the first game, obviously, he went into Berlin, which he couldn't really prove anything against, and last time we saw him play some anti-Berlin with 4d3, so I guess we'll see what he has planned this time.
So again, knight f6, d3.
So this is kind of a copy of the last game so far.
Bishop c5.
Okay, so he does take here, so this is a change from the last game.
Giving up the bishop pair.
And so again, we're going to kind of have this same trick as last time, where if we take on e5, then queen d4, threatening the mate on f2 means that...
Wow, that's what he played.
No.
Oh, that was it.
Wow, okay.
No, he goes knight d2, which is interesting.
It's rare, and but it's being played, I think, by both of them. It's a very slow way of developing. It's kind of the normal plan, as we saw last game. But it's just
to there, to there.
Yeah.
And you don't have to castle.
You usually castle and play rook e1 first, but it depends what black plays, because I think you have the option here between... Well, normally you see bishop g4, but then you have an option between takes on f3 and back to h5 after h3. If the bishop were to go back to h5, that's generally when you play the knight g3 lines, because you push away the bishop again. Otherwise, you like to put it on e3, because it's more central.
Okay, so bishop g4, h3, bishop h5. Well, I mean, there are a couple of options here for Magnus. I mean, he had the chance to take on f3.
Yeah, I think in the Grandmaster games that have been seen so far, taking on f3 is basically played in all of them. So I think bishop h5 was essentially a novelty kind of thing, but it's clearly fine. It's just because there hasn't been that many games played in it.
I guess you get something like this, and this is a game. A different game.
I mean, you could play, normal plan castles, and after rook e1, knight f1 to g3, bishop g5, bishop e7 will likely come in response. Yeah. It's just some game.
I think that Magnus, his eyes would have lit up when he saw this being played, because again, he's got to do... Well, he knows this stuff, and it's his opening prep, and he's black, and this is find for him is going to have the kind of stuff that he kind of likes to play.
I think e4, e5 is just such a solid opening, and it suits Magnus so well. It's really awkward for Anand to try and find something against it.
So we have knight d7, and the knight comes to g3, moving the bishop back, or indeed just taking.
Yeah, I think after bishop g6 you could say that the bishop was getting very kind of restricted in h4, maybe, threatening h5.
Yeah.
Generally you just take that off after bishop g4, even if you've delayed it a square by going back once.
So we have this g6 move. The idea of this is to take away the f5 and h5 squares for white's knight.
Yeah, and I think it's especially good in these lines because white spent so much time getting the knight there in the first place. But yeah, I think when you play g6, admittedly it does weaken your king side quite a bit, but I think when you've played d takes c in the opening as black, it can be quite a common plan to instead castle queenside after something like queen e7, because then your rook on d8 is already, it's got a half open file there.
So bishop e3 here, that's kind of a surprising choice for Vichy, offering to exchange the bishops, and if you're trying to, if all the pieces come off the board, it's just going to be a draw. So you need more than a draw, Vichy. You need a win.
Yeah, maybe his idea is to take back with the f pawn, and then he'll have an open f file and try and get some attack around that. But still, it's not much to play with, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see what happens. Queen e7 is played, and kind of preparing Magnus to castle queenside.
But at the same time, I feel like when you play the Ruy Lopez, you set your pieces up, you move them over to the king side for an attack there. So what would make sense to me is Vichy going for some attack on the king side, either via the f pawn or the h pawn. So I kind of expect him to castle queenside as well, which means it's less of a... I mean, when you think attacking games, you think opposite sides castling, so even if they've castled king to queenside, it seems aggressive, but if they both do it, not so much. He could take a risk here and castle kingside and go for a big attack queenside, but then even that extra doubled c-pawn that Magnus has can kind of work in his advantage because it's an extra defensive pawn, and he'll be able to trade it off when white's pawns get further up the board.
Yes. Unfortunately, well, depending on which way you look at it, queenside castle for Vichy, which is kind of the human move, essentially, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
It's because it continues with that opening style.
Yeah.
So we get both of them on the queen side, and now the knight has to... Well, it's coming back again now. I guess to open up his g-pawn.
Yeah, I guess maybe he wants to play g4, but
I mean, the knight's doing nothing on g3 because of that g6 move.
G6 pawn, yeah.
So knight e2, rook e8, king b1, just a move to get off get off that c1 h6 diagonal. It's kind of typical.
Yeah, maybe he also wants to move his knight back to c1 to b3, so he's done like the whole tour of the back three ranks.
Yeah. And also covers the a2 pawn as well, so this is kind of a normal move. And b6. So that's an interesting move from Magnus.
Yeah, I think probably it's just to allow space for his king for king b7. Because he doesn't really have to do much in this position. He's already centralised his rooks, his pieces are developed. It's kind of a half-waiting move as well, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, now that his king's here, it's difficult to attack.
Again,
really.
I just feel like Vichy's opening hasn't given him what he wanted.
I mean, it's doing h4, h5, which is always a good plan in absolutely any position. Um, but perhaps a little bit too late, especially the king's on the wrong side of the board. So Magnus takes on e3, just trading a piece.
Yeah, I feel like now maybe you just want to take back the queen, because I don't think White can really legitimately say that attacking down the f file will be useful to him, because the king's the other side of the board. So I just try and keep the pawns the same, I guess.
Well, on the flip side, if you're trying to create some imbalance, trying to go for the win, then this is one way of doing it.
But what would be the idea later on? Is it some d4 push, maybe? Or...
Yeah, I mean, well, you have first of all you're trying to tie up the f7 pawn.
Okay.
Black's a defense of that, right? So I guess what would you do as black here? Defend it somehow.
Yeah, I might even just push f6 and look to keep the knight on e7. And then it's very hard to trade off because we can't really get the knight to g4 very easily. It has to take a long tour to get there. And then you're maybe even threatening f5 yourself. So
Perhaps.
That might be one way to play against it.
Okay, well, you want to do this, do you? Okay. Okay. Well,
I don't know, just something like that.
I'm gonna come here. I'm gonna come here. I'm gonna come here. I'm gonna come here.
Ah, it's so sudden.
But then you play this.
Yeah, basically.
And then I have to come over here. And then, oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, this is okay, but it's obviously not great.
Look at that knight. What is it doing?
Gone everywhere.
It's going to be pretty tired. It's done the Grand National.
Yeah.
And realise it's back at the start. Anyway, so that would be one way. Because, he did play queen takes. But now it's kind of like, what has he gained from this?
I'm not sure. As you said, he does have this attack along the h-file. That's his main thing he's playing with. But again, I feel like that can kind of be negated a little bit with just rook h8 at a later point.
So, knight c5 played, now that the bishop's gone, and that just... I don't know really what it does, but...
I think probably the idea is knight e6 to help control d4 and f4. Then maybe there's something like queen f6, you just really tie up that f4 kind of square, and also from your queen from f6 will support rook h8 to help Russell control the h-file.
Yeah. So the h-pawns get swapped off, and you could think about bringing the rooks onto the h-file, but Fishy decides to go for the very slow g3.
So I guess what he's thinking is he wants to push f4 rather. But yeah, I mean, rook h7.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking, like rook h7.
Yeah, so
I mean, I guess he plays rook h8.
Yeah, rook h8, then maybe rook dh7. But then maybe you just play something like queen f6.
Or you can just take it.
Well, you can take it, yeah, but...
yeah, you can play queen f6, okay, fine.
If we play queen f6 first, then it means we can take it and play rook h8 next move, as opposed to letting him play like queen h3 intermediately. Because here if he plays queen h3, obviously we can trade in f2 hangs, so... It looks like black's covering everything.
Yeah, okay. So g3, preparing this f4 push, hopefully. Oh, in this case, he's doing this way first. Okay. So just a preparing move. And now...
So I guess we'll see. Probably just rook h1.
Yeah. Rook h1. Takes on h7. Okay. Now queen f6.
So it's similar to what we said before, but actually he's now able to play this f4 push, which I guess was the idea behind g3.
Well, he could have played it before anyway, but
Okay.
but, but he would have had to take back with a different piece, with a piece of a pawn, if he so wished.
Yeah, and that would have left the g3 pawn isolated, which again could be a weakness in the endgame.
Yeah. So, rook h8. Again, Magnus wants to just trade stuff off, which he's kind of forced to do. And now, I mean, he spent under an hour. He played 24 moves, and it's pretty much dead as a draw, as you can possibly imagine. Well, we said that last time as well. But
yeah, Magnus seems to be able to make things out of these positions, but it's kind of Anand's turn to try and do that. I mean, it looks like you have some kind of trick if you can just take on e5, because after queen takes you can play d4 and fork, but that's blocked by just queen takes e4, and then your queen hangs on e3, so you're actually just winning a pawn in that line for black.
yeah, and now he's going to get the g3 as well, eventually, perhaps. So instead of this d4 move, he plays queen f3.
So he attacks f7.
And yes, it attacks f7. So Carlsen plays f5.
And now, if anything, I would say black is actually pressing, because he's in a bit more of a aggressive posture.
So exchanges on f5. So we've got equal material, and it's tricky to see what to do now. I mean, c3, just preparing. Well, it's not, again, you can't really fork him.
Yeah, again because of queen e4 check, but
yeah.
I mean, black still has that doubled c pawn, but it's really hard to take advantage of it.
I mean, one way, if you just give black a useless move like a4, you could do something like knight d4 and either c6 square, but again, black can just defend it.
Yeah, and then like, even though f5 hangs,
yeah, that's
whichever
true.
way you take it, if you take with the queen like that, g3 hangs, so you can do queen takes g3 here. If you take with the knight, d3 hangs here. So, I mean, maybe this is something to try, because at least the g-pawn is passed and by itself.
That is true.
At the same time, I think this is maybe somewhat of a dream scenario, and that I don't think Magnus had to play the preceding moves to lead up to this.
I'm just playing some moves just to try and see how far I can get. Come on, the pawn. Oh,
but at the same time, you'd also have to be careful, because obviously the 4 against 3.
Yeah.
On the king side, it's like, it's not dangerous unless white doesn't have his king there for some reason. For example, he's chasing a knight halfway around the board.
Yeah, I think this is probably good for white here, but anyway. Knight e6, stopping any dreams of playing that knight to d4 for Vichy.
So it's a sensible move.
And okay, so he's going to bring the king up and just sort of support some pieces, some pawns. I don't know, just got needs something to do, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, now knight g5 by Magnus just attacks the queen. And he decides to go back to f2. I mean, perhaps g2, perhaps slightly. Keeps an eye on that c6 pawn, just keeps the pin on.
Yeah, it keeps an option of knight d4, but then I think maybe just knight e6 back again. And it's, now what do you do? It's hard to progress, I think, and I think g4 is risky because black has the option of taking it, but also he can push f4 himself, and then that pawn's actually a square further ahead than the white pawn.
Yeah, there's nothing much to do here. I mean, things like a4 don't really work or do anything.
No, I mean you can even get risky there because knight c5 attacks a4 and it's somewhat awkward.
So Vichy plays queen f2. Carlsen goes back. Queen f3 again by Anand. Knight g5, and that's pretty much a draw for right there. And after queen f2, knight e6, and that's a threefold repetition. And it's a draw.
Okay.
So pretty much perfect for Magnus. I guess the plus point from Anand's point of view is that he didn't lose again.
Yeah, I mean, he had lost 2 in a row prior to this, so in some ways it's nice to just kind of stop the bleeding, like they say, but at the same time it was another white. There's 5 games left in terms of, chances to win, but he's in, 2 of them are going to be whites, I think, so 3 blacks, and it's going to be harder.
It's going to be tricky.
Yeah, I think he needs to step up his openings to something more aggressive, even if it is more risky, just to really have a chance of getting back into the match. Because Magnus is just so solid in.
It's kind of weird that normally you think of a World Championship match and they're going to spring some kind of opening novelty on someone, right? They don't play many other tournaments, or they play them quite conservatively because they don't want to spoil their or give away their opening prep. But here in this championship so far, nothing really has been. It's all been kind of played before. I mean, I guess Vichy had a game. Was it one of the first game where he did a small novelty, and that was just completely equalised position
against the Reti, yeah.
But still, I mean, there's been no great novelties or opening shenanigans.
For me, it's kind of weird that he chooses to play the Rai Lopez when Magnus is, or it surprises me how easily Magnus is equalised against them, because you'd have thought it's a very, easily well, it's a line that's very likely to be played because Magnus plays it all the time. So you'd have thought he'd have something more concrete built up against that in terms of opening prep. And if he couldn't find anything against it, then why is he playing the Rai Lopez? Maybe he wants to deviate by playing a d4 line, where it's not as easy to find those kind of lines, or if he wants to play some Scotch or just some other random e4 opening, which can potentially avoid those lines where there aren't that many tactics and it's more based on plans. I'd be interested. I think we might see d4 from Vichy in his other white games to see if he can do something with that, because e4 is just not working out for him.
Okay, so next game is tomorrow, where Magnus is white. Guess the move. Move 1. What do you reckon he's going to do?
Let's say c4 again.
Alright. I probably have to agree with you there.
He could play knight f3 again, because, a draw is obviously much more suiting to his situation now, but...
But what should Vichy play? If he sees c4 on the board, what's the most aggressive thing he can do?
You can play like a reverse Grand Prix or something. He should play 1 e5, I think, against that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's kind of a Sicilian in reverse, but the English is considered a bit more passive than the Sicilian, and even though it's kind of the same, it's I think that could get to a game much more suiting to Anand, because you'll have attacking on both sides of the board because of the opposite kind of pawns.
I mean, if he doesn't pick a suitable opening choice, then you've got to really question, his whole team as well, his seconds that he has. I mean, they're all there just to try and get him the best position out of the opening as he can, and doesn't seem to be working so well.
It's particularly weird for me, because I feel like they were so good at that in the previous matches. Like his semi-Slavs were amazing and just like destroyed Kramnik. When I thought Kramnik was playing really well prior to that, and it was just these kind of opening, preparing moves that were getting him the advantage basically, because he'd just instantly play 25 moves and it would be some novelty, and Kramnik had like less than half an hour to the full amount of Vishy's time, and Vishy was almost winning already. And you're just not seeing anything like that because of the openings that Magnus has been able to force the game down. But that's partly Vishy's fault, because he is white and black, so at least with one of the colours you're going to be able to force it down some line you like, I feel like.
Okay, well, I guess we'll leave it there, and tomorrow we'll see how Vishy can try and respond and try and get a point on the board, which would be nice for him. So we'll see you tomorrow, and until then, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him.
That's right.
Bye.
Goodbye.